All right. It's time to talk about Endgame, the Top Cow big event, which is it really a big event? I don't know, but we're going to start with Prelude to Endgame with Tomb Raider issue 24, which if you're reading the archive edition, they call it Medusa's Garden. Basically the monk that Lara brings to the real world from like the spirit realm and her are kind of an item, I guess. But the the antagonist from the trap paths of the tiger, he's mad at them for not getting what he wanted, and so he goes after them. And they basically have a harrowing one-shot adventure that just it basically sets up that Lara is like vulnerable again. That's just the point. It's basically an epilogue to the previous arc and has nothing to do with Endgame other than she's solo again. That's it. But this was marketed as a prelude to Endgame. Now the next two issues I'm going to talk about do have to do with Endgame, and that is Witchblade issues 58 and 59. And I need to put a caveat out there. My knowledge of Witchblade is very limited. I'm not a Witchblade hater. In fact, from what I've read of Witchblade, I find it interesting. My knowledge of Witchblade, believe it or not, comes from the TNT series from the early 2000s that went for like a season or two, and was unceremoniously canceled, even though it did very well ratings wise, which is it, like with Firefly, the early 2000s spawned some very interesting TV shows, and this is one of those hidden gems. I've read Witchblade here and there. I read some of the 2017 reboot. I've read a few of the early issues, but my goal was, after I finished reading all the Tomb Raider stuff, once all the Colossal editions of Tomb Raider came out, and I had reviewed all that, I was going to cycle into Witchblade, which would be sometime next year. Because they've been doing these complete Witchblade hardcovers. This is the fourth one. This came out like a couple months ago. I just picked it up. Like, it came in a week or two ago, which is why it's still in the shrink wrap. I own all of Witchblade, the original series, digitally, because when it ended, they Comixology, when that was still an app, before Amazon just made it part of Kindle, they did a huge sale on the Witchblade series, so I picked up every issue for 99 cents a piece, which is a lot of money, but honestly, I saved a lot of money, especially at that time. A lot of it was shocking that it was all on Comixology at that time, because a lot of it hadn't been collected before. And then Image started doing these Top Cow hardcovers. They do them for Witchblade and The Darkness. Started doing them a few years ago, where they're just slowly collecting the whole series now, at least the first volume, which I think is pretty awesome. And so I picked up the first three not too long ago, probably a year or so ago. I think I talked about them on a stream a while back, because I think Witchblade's an interesting concept. And so this just came out, I picked it up. And I read issues 58 and 59, which are setting up. There's something going on in New York. People are flatlining and then coming back to life, and then taking their significant others and feeding them to a void, which is like really weird. And so Sarah is on the case on that, which leads into Endgame. Endgame is a 3-issue series that collects Tomb Raider 25, Witchblade issue 60, and Evo issue 1. We'll start with Tomb Raider 25. Tomb Raider 25 is one of the weirdest issues of the series. It has some of the best art, which it is, I do believe, Michael Turner is drawing Lara Croft, something that is right up my alley of things I like. I love Michael Turner's art. He's one of my favorite artists. And in this, Sarah has brought Lara in to investigate this void, and Laura ends up being possessed by the Void, essentially. So we go into Witchblade issue 60, where Sarah and Laura kind of face off, and we find out there's this entity under New York that has been there for thousands of years that wants the Witchblade, and we don't know why. Cut to Evo issue 1, where we're 3,000 years into the future. I believe it's 5032. A group of thieves are trying to steal the Witchblade, which is just, it doesn't have a wielder anymore. It's just in this mansion, and they end up being, these thieves and two of their hostages end up being sucked back to 2003 when this event happened, and end up facing off with this guy. And for the sake of not spoiling everything, we'll refer to him as the Weave, because that's what the Witchblade itself refers to him slash it as. There's also other things like going on, especially in the Prelude stuff, that doesn't really have anything to do with this event. Rather, it's setting up other Witchblade things that are overarching plots in the Witchblade series. And I gotta make this clear. This is a Witchblade event that happens to have Lara Croft and these Evo people in, which, as far as I can tell, the Evo people, they don't show up again. They don't get their own series. This was like a one and done thing. I wonder if they thought, hey, maybe we'll do a futuristic comic. And by the way, the future is just about as top cow as humanly possible. It's kind of goofy. Reading this in 2025. It's unique, but it's very top cow. Everything is like organic, like tech and like flesh are sort of one. It's a weird event. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of this at all, if I'm being completely honest. If I have to be objective. If I had read more Witchblade prior to this, in fact, I will revisit this when I go through all of Witchblade, I'll probably like it more then. And I'll probably do like a re-review then. But I needed to tackle this now because of the Tomb Raider connection and just trying to be a completionist with all my Tomb Raider stuff. If you're a Tomb Raider fan, you're not going to get much of anything out of this. In fact, Laura's like a possessed villain through most of this. She gets some cool stuff in Tomb Raider 25. It's very clear, though, this isn't her creative team working on this. Even though we have a new creative team that's been working on it for the last, 4 previous issues, they're not involved. In fact, I'll talk about this more when we get to Tomb Raider issue 26. Because there's kind of like a weird middle finger thrown in for some wild reason. I don't get it. I don't get this, at all. But it's a weird one. It's just a weird event. What would I rank this? It's like a 3 out of 5. The art's never bad. It's top cow, so if the art's bad, it's kind of shocking. We've seen bad art in these Tomb Raider top cow comics before, and what I mean by bad, it's just kind of okay. But that was the point of top cow, was it was good art, with some interesting ideas. The revelations in Evo #1 to try to make sense of this event, because nothing is particularly explained in any of the previous issues, leaving Evo #1 to be all of the clunky plot dialogue that should have been doled out throughout this event. It's dated, it's funky. It ends on a bizarre cliffhanger, which we'll talk about when I review Tomb Raider, the next Tomb Raider arc. Because it's just bizarre. I don't know if this was supposed to be the how they wanted Tomb Raider to end in this event. It doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Also, like it's just clunky. That's just there's not even an also to it. On a positive note, it finally happened. I got the Colossal Tomb Raider Volume 1, which omits issue 25, and I fully get it. Could you skip this issue 25, and skip Endgame as a whole if you just want to read Tomb Raider, and just stick with issue 24? Yes, you could. What would I actually rank the Prelude to Endgame issues? Tomb Raider issue 24 gets a 2 out of 5, although it's a great like chase comic. To call it a prelude to an event and it has nothing to do with the event is inexcusable. The Witchblade issues 58 and 59, also, if you're just reading this for the event like I did, not a good way to read these. These are not jumping on point issues. There's quite a bit of lore, especially in issue 58, that if you haven't read if you haven't read Witchblade, you're not going to understand what's going on in like a good third of that comic. Like, it just doesn't make... There's things happening with like villains and stuff that don't even show up in the freaking Endgame event. It's just weird. It's just weird and badly thought out. That's basically my issue with this event. So, anyway, have a nice day.